BJ Nix, are you here?
Present.
Present. Spoonie, Timothy Spoonie.
Present, sir.
Margaret and Mary. Do we have a Margaret and Mary?
Yes.
Cool.
And the margaritas.
All right. Class here. We're ready. Let's go.
Yes, let's go.
Okay.
This is the time to line up behind your team, to support your team. Have faith in that team.
You know, it's peaks and valleys. You know, it can't always be good. And as I always tell people, you're never as good as you think you are, and you're never as bad as you think you are. But when we do know about
house call, Trevon Diggs, pick six. It's coming. They see it. Knocked away. Oh, Gregory! Hurts in trouble. 3 Cowboys wrap him up, make it 4. Micah Parsons is unblockable.
Ladies and gentlemen, Cowboys Nation, maybe some Giants around here. I don't know. We'll see what happens. You're now tuned into the Pick Six Live Sports every single Wednesday. You know, y'all catch us right here with the usual suspects. But this week, coming up for the Monday Night Football, we got a special guest in the house. Let's talk a little Giants football with the 2-0 Giants, that is. Our guy, Lance Meadows, in the building. You might know him from Sirius XM Radio. You might know him from Giants Radio. Some play-by-play with. I mean, you're a busy man, sir.
I am indeed. The check is in the mail, by the way, for that intro. Thank you very much. I think you covered everything that I do. I don't know. You may have left out 1 or 2 things, but we'll have to work that out at a later date. Yes, this is an extremely busy time, but it's also a fun time because we're in the heart of the NFL season. We've waited all through months upon months of going through the offseason moves, the draft. So it's now good to at least break down some real tangible football games.
Tangible indeed. It's always fun the first couple of weeks, right? Because teams are finding out who they are. You kind of get through that first 4 games and maybe now 5 with the 17-game schedule, not so many preseason games to really see where things are. And, you know, week 1 of the Cowboys Nation, burn it all down. Week 2, look, we can beat anybody, you know. And, you know, obviously the Giants, one of the surprise teams being 2-0, which makes Monday night so intriguing. But with that being said, I'm going to spin it on around here. My guy, Professor O's in the building as always. Professor O, how are we doing this Wednesday?
I'm doing really well because the last time I had a chance to be on live with you guys, we had not won a game this year. So feeling a lot better this week than I was last week. Because last week I was like, you know, we made it 3 quarters into our first game and our season's over. And then the injury timelines and all that stuff started changing. And it was like, he's going to miss 6 to 8 weeks and then 4 weeks. And then Jerry Jones is like on WebMD. He'll be back in 10 days. Give or take. Give or take. Don't panic and start burning stuff. We'll have him back. So I feel better now. All kidding aside. So yeah, it's been a good week.
Big thanks. Mary Ella, how are we doing this Wednesday?
Yeah, it's been a good week, man. We got to celebrate a victory on Sunday.
You're glowing. You wasn't glowing last Wednesday. This Wednesday, there's some glow to the face, though.
It's always good to win. It's been a quiet week at work. I mean, everybody's just letting me be great, so I appreciate that.
And then, of course, the one and only Spoonie. I don't know. Will we get a sermon tonight? I don't know. But Spoonie's already run through a brick wall. He's ready to be in MetLife Monday night. If y'all missed the space, he's already ramping up. Spoon, how we doing this week? First and foremost, you went to the gym and sent us the video. You had the Cowboys towel on the head, getting the workout
Yes.
in. I mean, my goodness.
Yes. I've been getting cooked all week. Last week, of course, too, after the loss against Tampa. And, so today I decided to have my Dallas Cowboy towel. And as I was on the elliptical, they was getting at me, which was fun. And I tell them, we're going to see each other come Monday night. And, it's great love, great spirit by both sides, NFC East rivals. We have a lot to play for. The Giants, they definitely, from the fan standpoint, they're definitely buying into Brian Daboll, what he's doing for this team, which is a great thing. It's going to be a great matchup.
That part. Well, with that being said, everybody's had time to arrive and settle in and get ready. Let's start off here. Since we got our guy Lance in the building, let's go ahead and let's start with the Cowboys and the Bengals game first. Catching that game and seeing what you got to see of it, what was your big takeaway from that game from the Cowboys and Bengals?
Well, my takeaway is what I thought about the Cowboys coming into this season. I thought the X factor was going to be the defense. Even if Dak Prescott was fully healthy right now, I really liked what I saw out of Dan Quinn's unit last season. It was a complete 180. Remember, 2 years ago, we're talking about the Dallas Cowboys defense, and if you don't put on an offensive clinic, you're going to be in trouble. Now, all of a sudden, you can win a game when you only scored 20 points, which was unheard of in Dallas over the last few seasons. So my biggest takeaway was you held Joe Burrow to under 200 yards, 1 touchdown, and the Bengals, who are more than capable of lighting up just about anybody with that receiving core, were limited to 17 points. So the pass rush, getting after that offensive line, not allowing Cincinnati to march up and down the field, that was my biggest takeaway. Cooper Rush, we saw what he could do against the Minnesota Vikings last season, right? He showed a bit of a flash. And my feeling is with any backup quarterback, specifically Cooper, you prioritize taking care of the football. You don't put your defense in a precarious spot. The Cowboys should be able to hang around with most opponents this season, and I think that's exactly how the Cincinnati game played out. Think about this. If you can hold Tom Brady and Joe Burrow in check, where they didn't damage you, then why can't you do the same against the Daniel Jones run offense? So I think the Cowboys are in a very good position because of how their defense is playing, and that to me is the biggest takeaway. Even I would have said the same thing after the Bucs loss, which wasn't pretty from an offensive standpoint, but you still held Tampa Bay to 19 points, and that's going to keep you competitive and within striking distance.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the biggest thing, and we talked about that after the Bucs game. It's like if before the game they sent us a piece of paper, hey, Tom Brady 220, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 19 points. I think all the Dallas Cowboys, they should have been like, oh, the Cowboys are going to win this and probably win this kind of easily maybe. And sure. Obviously that didn't happen. And interesting point that you brought up about them not putting the defense in a bad position against the Bengals. Boy, they tried to the first drive on 4th and 2. Look, if they don't get the first down, the Bengals are getting a field goal minimum. But as the football gods so see it to be, Cooper Rush was able to hit our guy from Ohio State. I'm calling from the Ohio State now since he's finally walked through the door a little bit for us and got the first down for us. The Bengals, which is intriguing with that offense and what you mentioned, when we get to the Bengal talk is, I think the biggest thing for me going from week 1 to week 2, I know, we kind of talked about this some too, was going into this, all of us did going into it was, man, you can't let them run the ball the way they were able to run the ball on the left side with Leonard Fournette in week 1. And I was really surprised how the Cowboys were able to limit Joe Mixon. I think that's kind of the catalyst as we're talking about getting into the Giants game with the leading rusher in the league. Now, granted, some of that's because of some big pop runs and not maybe big consistent stuff. But the fact the Cowboys were able to limit Mixon, and that's kind of the Achilles heel that has been here even last year with Dan Quinn at certain points. Once Brett Urban went out, I was very surprised by how they were able to hand and keep Mixon contained in a bottle.
Well, you bring up an interesting point. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say, you bring up an interesting point in terms of how that applies to the Giants because, one of the keys that I would point to is the fact that the Giants haven't been put in a position where Daniel Jones has had to shoulder a game because of what, to your point, Saquon Barkley and the rushing attack has done. So if you're Dallas, if you can contain Saquon, meaning you could allow the Giants to run, but you don't want to give up that back-breaking run. You were talking about the Tennessee game. He had a 33-yard run. He had a 68-yard run. Those both translated to touchdowns. If you're Dallas, Saquon could get his yardage. You just don't want him to get that big explosive play. They want to go 9 plays, 98 yards, 2 yards here, 5 yards here. You can live with that, especially if then your red zone defense can hold them to just a field goal. It's the back-breaking plays. And I think Dallas was effective in doing that against Joe Mixon. You'd like to see them, from Dallas's perspective, duplicate the same thing against Saquon. And that's the beauty about the Dallas defense. They have guys that can run towards the quarterback, but could also stop the run. How many teams do you see? They have great pass rushers, right? They get to the quarterback. They can't stop the run if their life depended on it. A lot of the edge rushers in Dallas, and especially the rotational guys inside, you at least have confidence en route to the QB. They can stop the run, and I think that's going to have to show up against the Giants.
Go ahead, Oak.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think a lot of that was Quinn Bohanna last week. So this is something the Cowboys fans have been clamoring for years, saying we can't stop the run because we don't have that big beast up the middle that's commanding double teams and making life easier for those linebackers, making those linebackers not have to shed blocks to go make a play. And we saw that last week. Quinn Bohanna just was a menace. He's a guy that you're never going to see light up the stat sheet because that's what one techs do. Their job is to do the dirty work and fight and take on those blocks to free up those linebackers, free up those edge rushers to step up and make a play. And we saw that. There was a lot of times when Joe Mixon got a handoff and there's 2 or 3 Cowboys players waiting for him 1 yard past the line of scrimmage because he did such an effective job of eating up those blocks that all they had to do was beat their one-on-one or shoot a gap and they're right there in the backfield. So he did a pretty good job week 1, but there was a noticeable difference week 2 in Quinn Bohanna versus what we saw week 1. And to your point, a lot of the runs that we did give up, we were susceptible to runs on the outside, specifically with guards and tackles getting in space, blocking Diggs. And Diggs as a cornerback, most cornerbacks are not going to win that battle. When they have a 290 or 315 pound offensive lineman pulling, it's not even a business decision. It's a physicality standpoint. They're just not going to be able to take on that block because they can't go low like they used to. That's a penalty. You can't cut the offensive lineman down to blow up the play like you used to be able to do. So kind of limits what defensive backs are able to do. So taking, having the interior pressure, be able to push that offensive line past the line of scrimmage allows the cornerback and linebackers and edge and everybody else to be freed up. So I think that was a big key. And like Lance mentioned, Saquon Barkley in the past, when we played him, what we've seen, kind of historically with him throughout his career is 1 yard run, 3 yard run, negative 1 yard run, and then a 50-yard run. Like, you just don't want to give up that big play. If he gets 5 yards here, 6 yards there, that's fine because you're going to get them in passing situations, and then that's when those edge rushers are able to get to work. And we'll talk about a little bit of some of the advantages Dallas has versus the offensive line of the Giants, and then the Giants probably have a little bit of advantages against our offensive line in a few spots too. So we'll kind of back pocket that part.
Yeah, Spoonie, the thing from you looking at this Bengals and Cowboys game, Blink, Lance, you're outnumbered. Blink, trust. Hey, it's welcoming here. It's very welcoming. We're all friends. It's all fine. Spoonie,
I don't fear the conversation outside of Giants land, so no worries.
Fair.
We're probably going to be nicer to you than Giants fans.
Well, hey, you know what? In certain circumstances, there's a lot of validity behind that statement. I will disagree. But in all seriousness, through my work with Sirius, I cover all 32 teams. So I don't just look at myself as just a Giants person. I'm very much invested in just about every team in the NFL.
Spoonie, coming out of this, obviously we were there week 1 and had to leave that stadium with a bad taste in our mouth. Coming into week 2 and coming out of that, what was your big takeaway for you with this Bengals and Cowboys game?
The ability for them to come together and step up. That's a big thing. The culture has changed. As I said a long time ago, in the Garrett kind of when Garrett was running his team, the team will fold. This team has shown from last year to this year the next man up approach. And to me, when you have your starting quarterback like Dak Prescott out the game, and you gotta, on a week right there, you gotta prepare Cooper Rush to play, the Bengals team who went to the Super Bowl last season. Yeah, they had a bad game in the first game, but you still got to prepare him. They did a great job. The offense complemented what the defense was doing to the Bengals, and that's what we needed going forward until Dak comes back. So, for me, stepping up to the plate, taking all the conversation out from the media and everything, and just come together and play for that win.
Mary, lambasted, I guess would be the right term. One Kellen Moore the week before, but this week Kellen Moore kind of listened. Mike McCarthy kind of got out here in the media a little bit. It's like, hey, there's certain things. I had Jerry Ross. I'd have a little section of the play call. He had to be smarter, right? And we didn't see the trick plays or the too cute plays, and it looked like they actually had an idea how to use Pollard for the first time in God knows how long, and I just rotated there. So Kellen Moore, for you from week one, after we got into him pretty good last Wednesday to this Wednesday, what'd you like from Kellen Moore?
Yeah, I mean, we started out, really, really hot, and I think everybody pretty much on Twitter, online, whatever, was like, wait a minute, where was this last week? Like, what? Like, this is completely different. Like, I thought I was going crazy. I was like, I know I'm not the only one. So I had to look for validation on Twitter. I was like, wait a minute. So definitely an improvement. One thing that I've always complained about is the way he starts games. I don't like his script in the beginning. It was much better. It slowed down towards, the middle and the end. There's still things to work on there, but overall, like, the O-line was better. Noah Brown was better. He finally got his first NFL touchdown. Less penalties. So overall, just a more clean game. So I'm overall much more happy with that.
Okay, all right. I like Mary's always measured with it. I live actually. I'm gonna give you just enough right here. Fair enough, Mary. And people over here, Lance, one of the things after looking at the tape and going through it with Micah Parsons, I understand where he was at last year coming into this year. The one thing that I saw, especially, there was some in the first game too, but I definitely saw it a lot in this Bengals game, is last year he was getting his numbers and he was making an impact, but he wasn't the facilitator, if you will, of getting other guys involved. But now the way the teams have noticed what he does, and you saw him still get his, but to me, I was looking at, LV got a sack because of Parsons. Dorrance Armstrong got one of his sacks because of what Parsons did. And the evolution for me that I look at from year one to year two here with Micah Parsons is kind of the Von Miller effect. You look at him in Buffalo, you go back to week one, and even against Tennessee, where he was getting his. And remember, Buffalo couldn't get a sack for nothing last year. It was just a problem with them getting pressure on the quarterback. But you can see the effect of him, and you're seeing the defensive tackles. You're seeing the other edge kind of getting there now. And that was kind of the thing from last year to this year. Early on, and obviously it's very early, and we'll see how teams adjust to what the Cowboys are doing defensively. But I'm seeing the Parsons effect now throughout the line. Is that something you kind of picked up and noticed, or?
You were asking that to me?
Yeah, Lance.
I'm sorry. I wasn't sure whether or not that was a follow-up question in terms of the previous conversation. No, I absolutely think that your point is validated with respect to the Cowboys defense taking it up a notch, mainly because, once again, this is year two with Dan Quinn, too. Let's not forget. So there's much more continuity from that standpoint in terms of, I think, all the players having a better feel for what Dan Quinn wants to do. And now more and more film is out there of Micah Parsons. So when you go up against the Cowboys, you're game planning. We can't let this guy damage the game. So you may bring over the running back to chip him. You may take your offensive lineman and put the focus there. So that's going to leave some favorable matchups for the opposite side or the interior. I think what makes it difficult, though, to just expand on what you're talking about, is by Dan Quinn moving Micah Parsons around, it's very hard for teams to predict going in where he's going to be. And even if you do, there may be a new curveball that he's going to throw the opposing team's way. So you go in with maybe plan A, and then all of a sudden you got to switch it up to plan B and plan C by the time you get to the third and the fourth quarter. So I think that's stressing out a lot of teams that we're seeing as the games go by. And Brian Dable, he spoke to the media earlier today, and he was asked about Micah Parsons. He said he's a fun guy to watch when you don't have to play against him. He is, right? He's a very exciting guy to watch, but when you're going up against him, he's going to make you stay up late at night. He's going to give you headaches. And the interior of the Giants' offensive line has had its fair share of issues over the first two games. Andrew Thomas has looked very good. Evan Neal, I think, has held his own for the most part. But by Dan Quinn moving him around, you can't expect it's just going to be the tackles against Micah Parsons. There's going to be situations where the guards and the center, they need to account for Micah. And if I'm Dan Quinn, that's the area I'm targeting. I want to see whether or not that interior Giants offensive line can hold up against whatever Quinn has in store for them. And if they could hold up, fine. Maybe you need to switch things up. But that's been the Achilles heel of the Giants offensive line. So when you look at this 2-0 start, yes, impressive. Granted, they've won 2 very close games, but the offensive line is not necessarily in an area yet where you think they've put together their old struggles and they've put them to the sideline. So that to me is a door for maybe Dallas to attack moving forward here on Monday night.
Got you. The speaking of which, and well, before I get to that point, the last part, and we'll get off the Cowboys Bengals game, is I thought it was very big the special teams, right? Obviously the kicker that everyone was worried about with Maher, he's been money so far. Mary,
I swear I thought he missed it. I was, oh Lord.
Massey's not sure if he still made that final kick or not, but you know what? Pipes, okay, pipes is definitely where it is. But on top of that, Professor O, right? The Pro Bowl punter, what was it? 4 kicks inside the 20, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
4
for the season. He's already pinned 6 punts back in the red zone. So I mean, he's right on pace of what he did last year already.
Yeah, Brian Angle, yep.
Yeah, and then the small things. No, you didn't get the huge return from Turpin, but there at the end of the first half, Cowboys get a stop, and it was like in succession. Punt, pinned him. Davis got the stop. Turpin gets just enough of a return that allows them to get the field goal there at the end of the half.
Mm-hmm.
So as always, I like to say hashtag special teams matter. The Cowboys on that third side of the ball there, if you will, definitely had a good run there. And if you go back to week 1, even the special teams from the punting and kicking side did their job as well. So it's exciting to see that. I know it's like the hidden yardage kind of thing sometimes and what doesn't get brought to the forefront, but I thought it was very instrumental for the Cowboys beating the Bengals.
Yeah, definitely.
Anything else on the Bengals before we go? Anybody? We want to pivot over to the Giants? Anybody?
I just want to ask you guys, because I, just rewatching everything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, and I don't want to jinx anything, but I don't think the defense missed a tackle. Am I wrong?
Tell Brooklyn I said hello. Did the defense miss a tackle? I haven't looked at the numbers on that. Oh, have you looked at the numbers on the missed tackle? One doesn't stick out to me right away.
Yeah, nothing
like
really
if
comes
they
to mind.
did, it's very minimal, but I really don't think they missed a tackle all game.
I can let you know. Just give me a second. I'll come
Yeah.
back to you. I don't think so.
I mean, and that's, one thing we talked about, off season is, a lot of people say your defense can't keep up that amount of turnovers, but even though they haven't really had turnovers so far this season, I mean, they look better overall, in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah, no, very factual. And you definitely pounded the table about this during the offseason. Like, it's hard to repeat those amount of turnovers. But again, in what we talked about Diggs, it's like, can he be better? Look at the third down play to get the tackle. Speaking of not missing tackles, right? That caused to get the punt back from the getting a chance for him to make that kick and win the game. But you're right, like not missing tackles, playing it better against the run, getting more sacks. I mean, you had 7 sacks.
They're just all swarming to the ball. They're just
right.
Yeah.
And seven sacks, against the Bengals. I mean, obviously, when you're getting off the field, you don't have the opportunity for as many turnovers as well when you talk about the yardage that they're not giving up. So, absolutely.
So, maybe real quick, PFF, take it for what it's worth. PFF has 3 missed tackles. They had 1 for Anthony Brown, 2 for Donovan Wilson. But none of them really step up or stand out as big moments.
Yeah,
so if
yeah,
they
they
were,
don't
it was
stand out.
Somebody must have tweeted up right after.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
Okay.
Yeah, 10-4. Let's pivot over here to these Giants, these 2-0 G-men. So far for you, as you covered it for Giants Radio, Lance, what is the number one thing that you're seeing that's happening for them that you're like, maybe you didn't expect prior to the season, or just you kind of thought it could happen, you're seeing it come to the forefront of them in these 2 close wins?
Well, it's a great question. A big product of why they're 2-0 is, as you can see based on the final scores, they're winning the close games. And, that's where you get an additional 2 or 3 wins that you didn't expect. I'll give just a quick side note. 2016, coincidentally, was the last time they started 2-0. And I'm not bringing that up because of the fact that the records are equivalent. What I'm bringing up is that 2016 team that last made the playoffs, you go back and you look at that team, they were not a dominant Giants team. They were winning a lot of close games. There was a fine line between winning and losing. But more often than not, the ball was bouncing their way. You're seeing that in the first 2 games. So that has been one of the pleasant surprises, finding ways to finish. Daniel Jones picks up the 3rd down conversion against Carolina. They don't give the ball back to Carolina. That was a huge play. Tennessee, they get the 2-point conversion after the touchdown as Brian Dable decided he wanted to be aggressive. So you got to give the offense credit for finishing. From that standpoint, Randy Bullock missed a 47-yard field goal. I don't really think the defense or special teams did anything to force the miss. It's just the football gods cooperated after the football gods did not cooperate for many years because the Giants were on the wrong end of a lot of heartbreaking field goals. So I think it's fair to say finishing is one thing that jumps out to me. The other thing is the semblance of a rushing attack. That has been a major issue, and that's a product of the offensive line. But Saquon Barkley is giving you a little bit of a taste of what happened in his rookie year in 2018, those big explosive runs that I was talking about. And I think the best way to describe it is situational running. What I mean by that is game is on the line. You need to pick up a third down. You need to extend the drive. The Giants are getting those productive runs. Case in point, that last drive that led to Graham Gano's go-ahead field goal that made it 19-16, it was an 11-play drive. They ran the ball 8 times out of those 11 plays. Now, I don't care whether it was a 10-yard run or an 8-yard run. The bottom line is there's positive yardage.
Right.
They stayed ahead of the chains. Once again, things that we had not seen in previous years. So that's what I mean by situational running. And it goes back to my point. They have taken the game out of Daniel Jones's hands. They have not put it on his shoulders where game is on the line. Daniel's got to make a throw. Daniel has to get into the end zone. And, that's protected their quarterback. So that, I think, is one of the facets of the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, Wink Martindale's group, they have caught on to this new scheme. They've been fantastic on third down. They've got the number 1 third down defense through the first 2 weeks of the year. Opponents are 5 of 23. And really, the mixing and matching of downs is across the board. It's not everyone's facing 3rd and longs. They're stopping teams on 3rd and 5s and 3rd and 6s. So their third down defense has been very impressive. And I think a huge reason in getting teams off the field and not being exposed to those extremely lengthy drives.
Yeah. I wasn't, from the fan standpoint, I'm like, the Giants, I feel like they did a good job hiring coaches this year. And kind of what we were talking about in the pre-show space and what you kind of mentioned there too is like the thing about Brian D so far is, unlike maybe a previous regime that was coaching there, he'll continuously run the ball, period, so far. And that's where they're at. And I think that's definitely a big difference. You're looking at the Giants and what they've been doing thus far. What are some of the things that you were looking at too in their first 2 wins that maybe get the Cowboys a little bit credible, or just in general how they've gotten to 2-0?
Yeah, I promised somebody in one of the group chats, he's a Giants fan, that I'd ask Lance this question. So let me ask that, and then I'll get to the Giants numbers real quick. So Lance, my guy Sal, he's in the chat. Shout out to him. Says, ask Lance about how the Galladay situation is affecting the locker room and his teammates. Is that having any impact so far?
I always love a good locker room dynamics team question. It always rocks my boat. So I'm glad that we at least threw that out here early on. Well, the big thing is not that Cowboys fans are following the inner workings of the Giants locker room, I'm sure, but Kenny Galladay, his snap count, just to give you the proper context, he played a lot in week 1 against Tennessee. He only had 2 snaps in week 2. And to me, I'd compare it to Kadarius Toney. Kadarius Toney, another one of the Giants wide receivers, he had 7 snaps in week 1, and then he went up in week 2. And then we saw David Sills, another wide receiver, not get much of any work in week 1, and then he went up in week 2. My point is, Brian Daboll and this coaching staff, they're going to fluctuate playing time. They're not going to say every guy that plays week 1 is exactly who we're going to roll out in week 2. And Wink Martindale's doing the same thing on defense. He went and played a lot more linebackers in week 1, and then he relied on defensive backs in week 2 to match up with Christian McCaffrey. So I know it's a long-winded answer. I'm going to circle back here to the whole Kenny Galladay situation. No, I don't think it's impacting the team and the locker room because I think this coaching staff made it clear to the roster, we're not playing any favorites. We're going to evaluate week to week, and we're going to have specific game plans with personnel packages. So the fact that they made that clear to the team right out of the gates, Galladay's not happy about it. And, hey, if I'm Kenny Galladay, I wouldn't be happy about it either. Do you think you want a star wide receiver? If he went to the media today and said, you know what? I played 2 snaps. I'm good, guys and gals. Don't worry about it. Okay, right? You want to see some fire out of a guy, don't you? So you're damn right Kenny Golladay is irritated, and he should be pissed off because he received a very lucrative contract 2 years ago. He had no touchdowns. The entire team disappointed on offense, but he specifically has not played to his expectations. And this year, he was hoping to bounce back and get over the hump. That has not presented itself. So Golladay is irritated, and rightfully so. But I don't think that's feeding into the rest of the team, and I don't think that's going to take away from the team or be a distraction entering the game against the Cowboys on Monday night.
Especially when you're 2-0. If it turns into a 3-7 situation, not saying that it would, then maybe those noises become a little bit louder. But right now, 2-0, yeah, no way. Yeah.
Great point. If they were 0-2 right now and Kenny Golladay was not getting the snaps, it would be a completely different story than what it is right now. So that's totally fair. So when I was doing my Giants Cowboys pregame notes, I got some notes that I wanted to share with you guys from like a data statistical standpoint that I thought was interesting. So Lance mentioned they have a new defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale, coming over from the Baltimore Ravens. If you've watched Ravens games, you probably have a pretty good idea of what his defense is. Super blitz heavy. He loves to be aggressive. He does a little bit of those amoeba fronts that Nick talks about a lot, where they will crowd the line of scrimmage. There will be 5, 6, 7 guys there. You don't know who's coming. You don't know who's going. He, just wants to keep the offense on their toes. The Giants have blitzed 35.7% of the time, which is the 4th most in the league this year. Cowboys are 29.5, so we're top 10 as well. But 35% of the snaps, roughly 36%, we'll call it, the Giants are bringing a blitz, which is defined as 5 or more rushers. So that could be 5, 6, 7, 8, or whatever. What's interesting for the Giants, though, Lance kind of talked about their offensive line, specifically their interior. When they're facing a 4-man rush, they're giving up a pressure 39.7% of the time. So roughly 40% of the time, they're giving up pressure against just a 4-man rush. When they see 5 or more, it's 46.7%. The Cowboys with 5 or more is 35%, to kind of put that in context. So they're really struggling specifically, basically in any pass rushing situation, but specifically when you're bringing 5 or more pass rushers, which we saw a lot last week from the Cowboys with Cincinnati. The Giants have struggled to pick that up. So passing the ball, they're 31st overall, 159 yards per game. The Cowboys are 6th in passing yards allowed at 180 yards per game. So probably not going to see a huge aerial assault out of the Giants this week. But rushing is, where their bread and butter is. And before I move off of passing, I do want to be clear. Daniel Jones has the team has the 3rd fewest passing attempts at 55 total, but he has the 7th highest completion percentage. So he has been efficient this year. He's not throwing the ball downfield. They've only had 2 explosive passing plays this year, and the explosive passes are 20 or more yard receptions. So they're not throwing the ball deep, but he has been efficient and much better. And I think that's what Lance was talking about with Dable and the offense, kind of catering things to him to make this life easier where he is getting the ball out quicker. Or so you'd think. This is where I thought it was kind of interesting because I'm looking at the numbers and I'm seeing they're not pushing the ball downfield. But Daniel Jones' time to throw is 3.15 seconds.
Yeah, he's holding it.
Oh,
that's a long time. So Cooper Rush was 2.21 seconds. This is time to throw. 2.21.
Oh.
Tom Brady was 2.19 week 1. So he's getting the ball out basically a full second faster than what we're seeing out of Daniel Jones through 2 weeks. And Burrow was 2.46 seconds last week. So about a half-second difference there. And he got sacked 7 times and was pressured 10 times. So the Giants coaching staff, the biggest challenge for them facing us is going to be how do we get the ball out of Daniel Jones' hands even quicker than we already are doing? We're not throwing the ball downfield, so it's not a long developing route. We have to get the ball out of his hands quicker, especially with the offensive line giving up pressures if we're going to have success against the Cowboys defense, or at least that's where my mind goes if I was their coaching staff. Another thing I wanted to point out too, because this is near and dear to Cowboys fans, we have 15 penalties this year. The Giants actually have 16. So the Giants are having a lot of the same issues the Cowboys have had over the last few years, where they are racking up penalties and, putting themselves kind of behind the 8 ball. But they've been really efficient running the ball. Saquon Barkley and the Giants are 5th overall in rushing. So I think that's what you're going to see. Their run-pass ratio is basically 50-50. It's 50.7 and 49.3. So they're basically as near to 50-50 as you're going to get in the NFL, because really pass-run ratio being balanced now is like 55-45 or 60-40. So the fact that
60-40.
they're right there at 50-50 kind of shows you what you're probably going to expect. So just a couple of numbers I wanted to share that I thought was interesting.
Okay.
Well, going back to your point, just real quick about getting Daniel Jones to hold on to the ball and maybe try to take some chances down the field, to me, that starts with them stopping Saquon Barkley. Put the Giants in downs and distances where they have to go 10 yards or more. I don't think Tennessee or Carolina really put them in those precarious positions because they weren't able to really take away the run. I mean, the Giants weren't very effective in running the ball against Carolina in the first half. They had 8 carries for no yards, but they still finished with over 100 yards. They were much more efficient in the second half. So no team, to me, once again, has put Daniel and Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator, and Brian Dable, the head coach, in a position where they've got to air things out.
Mm-hmm.
If Dallas can do that, if they could take away some early runs and put the Giants in longer third downs, that's where now you make Daniel think. And you say to him, does he want to try to hold on to the ball a little bit longer to let things develop? Or does he want to try to take off with his legs, which then exposes him to hits? That's where he's gotten into a precarious spot. I don't think the first 2 opponents have been effective in forcing him into that area.
Right.
Yeah, I think, obviously, with the time, like you were talking about, there with, how long he has held onto the ball some here early on. That's why, to me, I think when I look at the Giants, and we kind of talked about this in the space, Spoonie, I'm intrigued to see if they really get into the bag, the Giants, of a lot of screen game early to maybe throw the Cowboys off, maybe put the defense in that rush that they want to pin their ears back and get after it to get them on their heels. So I guess my question would be at that standpoint, because I haven't looked at a lot of the tape of them. Are they a team that's willing to get into the screen game any so far in the first couple of weeks, or is it more of just the, hey, we're pounding it and we're just going to run our routes whenever we got to throw it? Are they kind of moving around somewhat in that and screening some of these smaller wide receivers?
Yeah, they've involved that within their offense. Wan'Dale Robinson, who to me is most effective in doing that, he got hurt in week 1. He did not play against Carolina. I would not expect him to play against the Cowboys. So that's one option that Dallas will not have to worry about. Kadarius Toney clearly is effective in doing what you're talking about, and so is Saquon as well as Sterling Shepard. It's not, though, just the screen game. It goes back to what we were talking about. If Daniel's getting rid of the football quickly, the whole ideology within this offense is yardage after the catch. Right. So let those guys do a lot of the heavy lifting, which is going back to what we were talking about earlier. The question arose about, well, how many missed tackles did the Cowboys have? And 3 was the answer. As long as you don't miss tackles against a team like the Giants, you'll put them in 3rd and longs. Where teams have gotten in trouble, and I'll go back to a Cowboys game last year. If you remember, Kadarius Toney had a field day in the first game. Okay, see, all of you are nodding your heads.
Yeah, until the punch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and remember, that was the first time that teams are also getting a taste of who Kadarius Toney is. The problem is he couldn't stay healthy last season. So I think the Cowboys have him on film. They understand how elusive he is. You do not want him to get out in open space. You do not want Saquon to get out in open space, or else that's going to come back to bite you. So, yes, that is a big part of their philosophy, though we haven't seen a lot of big explosive plays off of the screen. Saquon has had big runs, and Sterling Shepard had a big 65-yard touchdown because he got Christian Fulton, the corner of the Tennessee Titans, to just completely do a 360. Did a little bit of a dance move, and Sterling ran right by him. So my point is, yes, that's a staple of their offense, but I don't think that the 2 opponents have really been put in a tough spot where that has been something that they need to clean up. That doesn't mean that Dallas shouldn't worry about it, but we haven't seen an explosive playoff of that facet of the offense.
I did want to bring up something really quickly. So last Wednesday when we covered Bengals, we had a special guest, Flimlo Raps, and Flimlo is a YouTuber who does whatever happened to this guy. The first video I ever saw of him was David Sills. Since you mentioned him, I wanted to bring that back up kind of full circle, because David Sills' story, for those that don't know, was he was a 13-year-old phenom who had a full scholarship offer from USC, Southern Cal, offered him as a 13-year-old. He was this can't-miss, big-arm quarterback, ended up transferring to West Virginia. He decommitted to USC, kind of bounced around, transferred to West Virginia, and then reinvented himself as a wide receiver. So he's kind of been, from what I've seen from Giants fans, has kind of been their, I don't want to call him a Rudy because he's actually a good player, but but he's kind of been that guy that's a fan favorite that you want to do well, and you're kind of hoping that he has success. And this year, specifically last week, he got his opportunity. Do you mind telling people about about David Sills, for those that don't know how he's done this year? Like, is he a wide receiver 2-3 and just had a big game last week, or what are you guys expecting for the season from him?
I'm not that well read up on Bengals YouTubers, so I'm going to have to pass on that part of the question.
Well, the David Sills portion.
Yes, correct. No, I'm just giving you a little bit of a hard time. Understandable in terms of David Sills. Well, yeah, he's got a neat story. Absolutely. He's been on the Giants practice squad over the last few years. He's been one of those guys who I'm sure you all can attest to. You watch Cowboys preseason games, you get enamored by a player, and then you wonder, well, why didn't he make the 53-man roster? What's going on? And then you realize, well, they're evaluating things in practice, the level of competition. So David Sills has been a productive player in the preseason, but they've had a lot of talented players ahead of him. So he's been able to go through waivers. They kept him on the practice squad. And this year, new coaching staff, interestingly, he started his career in Buffalo briefly before he came to the Giants when Joe Shane and Dable were there. So I'm not surprised that they had some intel on him and maybe that gave him a leg up. No, he's not a huge part of this offense on the depth chart. If anything, actually, I thought maybe you're going to bring up Richie James, who's got even a better story as a San Francisco Niners special teamer. All of a sudden is leading the team in receptions this year through the first two games. So Sills is sort of within that wavelength, but I would be very surprised if the Giants are going to feature him against the Cowboys. What makes Sills intriguing compared to the other receivers that we were talking about, the Wan'Dale Robinsons, the Sterling Shepards, Sills is bigger. He's got a bigger frame. He's like Kenny Golladay, meaning he gives you height. He doesn't play like Kenny Golladay because he has a little bit more speed, and he's not a guy that's just going to win jump balls like Golladay. But no, he's not 1, 2, or 3. If anything, David Sills is like the 4th or the 5th wide receiver on the depth chart for the Giants at this point. However, they've seen things in practice that has warranted giving him some additional playing time. But once again, I'd be very surprised unless 3 or 4 guys get the injury bug against Dallas that we'd see a lot of David Sills in terms of his exposure in that game.
Okay. Right.
Well, you mentioned injuries. I kind of want to get into that a little bit because I saw that Kadarius Toney, he had some hamstring soreness. Leonard Williams, I think he injured his knee in the last game. I know a few of your other guys, they're working to come back on defense. Update us on what you think about their status for Monday.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought you buried the lead. I was waiting for a Kayvon Thibodeau, Azeez Ojulari question from you. I mean, all of you were navigating around this. I'm like, are they going to get to the hardest goal of the biggest storyline, maybe?
Yeah.
What a relief that we could finally get to that. Well, no, in all seriousness, Thibodeau and Ojulari have yet to play because Thibodeau got hurt in the preseason. Ojulari got hurt right at the end of training camp. It looks as if they're both trending in the direction of making their season debuts, to answer your question. Dable says they're getting close. They both took part in team drills today. I'd like to see them a little bit more engaged in team drills for the next 2 days, including Saturday, because Friday is just going to be a walkthrough. Right. And then I would say we'd probably have a better indication. But right now, I would classify it trending in the right direction. Very good chance that at least one of the two is going to suit up Monday night. Leonard Williams, he did suffer a knee injury. He got treatment during practice today. I'd be surprised if he plays. Dable classified it as he'd be surprised if he plays. He'd be surprised if he doesn't play. So he sort of entered that gray area. But one of these injuries with the knee, the way that they've approached Thibodeau and Ojulari is we're not going to rush guys back. We're not going to press the envelope. I think they're going to take it easy on Leonard and maybe say, hey, short turnaround against the Bears. Because remember, you play Monday into Sunday. To me, it would seem practical, rest him. And then maybe if he has an outside chance of getting back for the Bears game. And then Aaron Robinson is the other player that you didn't mention that I would bring up. One of their starting corners, he had an appendectomy, did not play in their last game against Carolina. He's been walking around the building, but I would say it's an outside shot if he plays.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the chances of a guy a week and a half, 2 weeks removed from an appendectomy to get back out on the field and take hits? So I would say Leonard Williams and Aaron Robinson more on the worst side of questionable, and then Ojulari and Thibodeau, I would say on the better side of questionable, at least as we reach the midway point here for the upcoming week.
So you think that Kadarius Toney will play?
That's right. You mentioned that's right. I forgot to mention Toney because there's a plethora of injuries that are piling up. Well, here's the thing. Toney, he appeared on the injury report the latter part of last week leading up to the Carolina game. He was added to the injury report, I think it was Thursday or Friday. All these days are a blur. And he wound up playing. And he played more snaps than he had in week 1. So I don't think it's an alarming mention of him still dealing with the hamstring injury. Unless he gets no work in practice over the next few days, I would think they take it easy. They put him on the injury report because, once again, it's something he's dealing with. And I think, in all likelihood, he'll be present in uniform on Monday. But remember, his snap count can fluctuate based on how they approach game to game.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Good, Spoon.
No, I was going to ask, Lance, what's your take on when you hear the comparisons between Micah Parsons and Lawrence Taylor? Now, we all know Lawrence Taylor, in my opinion, he's the best football player of all time, regardless of position. He changed the game. And there's still numbers that not even counted yet for his sack total. So when you hear Micah Parsons and LT in the same conversation, how does that make you feel?
It's funny. If you ask this question to one of my colleagues who is a diehard Giants fan who has been covering the team since the turn of multiple centuries, I won't bring up his name. If there's any Giants fans, they know who I'm talking about. He'd probably jump through the screen right now and try to shake the nonsense out of you. And I'm not wording it as nonsensical.
No, I know.
Interpreting me. But that's how he would do it. Right. Here's my feeling. Parsons is off to a spectacular start to his career. And he deserves all of the accolades. But Lawrence Taylor had longevity. When Micah puts together 5 seasons of this, I'm more than happy to revisit that comparison. So my feeling is, for those that jump the gun and they want to compare, let's see Micah Parsons actually have some early stages of his career. You know, the first 2 games, he's picking up right where he left off last season. He does this. And I see another 3 seasons of this. Yeah, then we could start to entertain the idea that when his career ends, it may be in that category of one of the all-time elite pass rushers who is certainly on track to make a call to Canton, Ohio. Right now, it's extremely premature. And I think if you're a Cowboys fan and you're the Cowboys coaching staff, the last thing you want to do is throw out Lawrence Taylor's name. Here's the one thing, though, that I've observed. Micah seems to be a very humble individual. It doesn't seem, and once again, I'm curious, your perspectives, it doesn't seem as if the analogies, the comparisons get to him. He doesn't seem to be caught up in the statistics. He goes out there, he plays ball to the wall, he's very productive, and then he gets set for the next game. So if he is going to follow the same track record as Lawrence Taylor, the good news is it doesn't seem like I have to worry about the off-the-field issues, which is a big positive considering LT. And if anyone doesn't know, read up on LT's rendezvous, and you'll certainly occupy your minds for some time. And then the second thing is, once again, he seems to be very stable in his approach in the early stages of his career. So all of that is encouraging. But to answer your question, let's see 3 or 4 seasons of this before we entertain the idea of the Lawrence Taylor comparison.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we saw that I found intriguing is speaking to where you're talking about with Micah Parsons, where he's at as a young player and how mentally he goes through these things, whether it's social media and handling the media in general, was, Undisputed came out and said, every Tuesday, guess what? Micah Parsons. I was like, that's interesting. I was like, I'm not a big fan of that personally. But I mean, we're in a different era now as compared to, I'm old, so we're in a different era now in how these players move and whatnot. I was like, I don't like that.
But he skipped the first episode, didn't he? I didn't
He skipped both of them.
He skipped both of them. Okay, I knew he skipped the first one. Yeah. So, and I think the reason he said he skipped it was because the team didn't perform very well. They lost Dak Prescott. He didn't want to go and expose everything after the game. So once again, that's an example to me of the maturity of a player.
Right. He said that their leader went down and now it's time for him to step up and be a leader, so he didn't need to be on TV. And then it was funny because we had this conversation after they won on the post game, and we talked about it that, they won. You think he's going to show up? And I was like, I don't think he will. I don't think he should, but I don't think he will either. And again, this Tuesday he didn't. So just kind of back to your point of how mentally he's kind of humble or how he's approaching everything. Like, I kind of tweeted this, like, he just gets it for a young man, a kid in the game, if you will. He just seems to get that side of the optics and what it means and how to move and navigate throughout that. And I think that's huge for a guy where he's kind of trajecting towards very early in his career.
100%. Well said. Because once again, we've seen players, they have unbelievable rookie years. It gets to their head. Then the rest of the league catches up with them. Right. And all of a sudden, that sophomore year, they take a step back, right? Because now all of a sudden, you need to adjust to coordinators having a better read on you. And once again, small sample size, but Micah, that motor is still going strong, okay? So once again, I think coordinators, they're game planning and they're still realizing, well, we thought he was going to be on the left side this game, and Dan Quinn moved him to the right. No, now Dan Quinn moved him to the middle of the defense. No, Dan Quinn put him in coverage. I mean, heck, the last game, he was exclusively playing defensive end. So, who knows where this guy is going to be? It really is a bit of a mystery, which adds a layer of intrigue to his whole profile.
Big facts. Let me flip it to the other side of the ball in this offensive line, and really, newly somewhat constructed over here for them, for the Giants. What are you seeing from them early on with the draft pick, obviously sitting out there and of course the other side though, my goodness, this young man's out here doing some phenomenal things and how he's handling business. But in general, this offensive line, not just against the Cowboys, just so far this season, what are you seeing? I know you kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, trying to still work through some things, but what are you liking from them so far?
Well, the tackles, I think they're in very good shape with Andrew Thomas. This is now year 3 for him. He has looked solid. I know he has, I believe, the highest grade based on Pro Football Focus. I don't get caught up in the numbers. To me, it's more of the optics, the consistency. Not to say the numbers are not important. They're a good complementary piece, but you see people quoting grades, and I don't think half the time individuals who don't read up on those numbers know what the heck that means. But the bottom line is he's held his own, and he's been battle tested. And he played very well last season, even though he wasn't fully healthy and dealing with an ankle injury. So that, to me, was very encouraging. Evan Neal, 2 games, but I think, once again, also positive, trending in the right direction. The question mark is the interior. Why? Because you have a lot of new pieces there. You have John Feliciano at center. He came over from Buffalo with Brian Dable and Bobby Johnson, their offensive line coach. You have Mark Lewinsky at right guard. He came over from Indianapolis in free agency. And then at left guard, initially, they thought it was going to be Shane Lemieux. But Shane Lemieux then got hurt in the preseason, so he's on IR. They drafted Joshua Zudu from North Carolina, and then they had Ben Bredesen remain on the team. He's a veteran offensive lineman who was with Baltimore, but he was also on the team last year. They've been rotating those 2 players at left guard. And they did a bit of rotation last season, too. So you've seen a little bit of the good, the bad, and everything in between. For example, Zudu seemed to get stronger as the game went along against Tennessee. He was in when they had a lot of strong run plays in the second half of that game. Last week, a little bit hit or miss. So the jury is still out, to answer your question, with respect to the interior of that offensive line. And that's why, if you look at the pressures and the sacks that they have allowed in the first 2 games, and Tennessee sacked Daniel Jones 5 times, it's come from the interior. They went up against Jeffrey Simmons in week 1. One of the most versatile defensive linemen. That's why I say, if I'm the Dallas Cowboys and I'm Dan Quinn, I would look to attack the Giants from the interior. That's what I would focus on and see whether or not they can make the necessary adjustments, whether or not Saquon is able to chip and be utilized at that complementary piece as a running back, because that's the Achilles heel still. If you're playing the Giants, you want to pressure them from the inside, since the strength is clearly the 2 tackles.
That's something we saw late last year with the Cowboys, too. When DeMarcus Lawrence returned from his injury, he actually played 3-tech quite a bit as the season went along. So that might be a way that they decide to slide him in rather than having him battle against Evan Neal or Andrew Thomas. They may say, let's go ahead and show some of those NASCAR in-game packages where you have maybe a Dante Fowler with Tank lined up at 3-tech. Then you play Osa, Neville Gallimore 1-tech. You have Micah rushing from the other side. or Sam Williams or something like that. So I definitely agree with that. I do want to mention, too, that name Josh Azuda. So that name should sound familiar to Cowboys fans because he was one of our top 30 visits. We actually talked about him quite a bit because he was the name that kind of surprised people because the other names on that list were Kenyon Green, Zion Johnson, guys that were projected to go in the top 25 and did go in the top 25. And then he was on the list. So he was a little bit of a head scratcher at first, but the Giants took him in the 3rd round, I believe. So just want to bring his name back up since you mentioned him. He's somebody that we've talked about on this show in the past as well.
Yeah. That's they're interesting because we know a little bit about that rotation and offensive line from last year and things that were going on. That boy, it didn't work for us. That's all I can say over the long strands of things. And there were times we were swapping both tackles. At times it was indifferent. So that's interesting because I didn't know. That's a great point you brought up. I didn't know they were doing that with those two guys at guard. But it makes sense. I mean, 3rd round guy picking up as he moves along, only a 2nd game in. Going to figure it out as he goes along. So I definitely get that. Now, the secondary for the Giants, I'm going to flip back over to the defense. I'm going to go a little offense, a little defense here with the Giants. From the secondary, obviously, as you talked about earlier, missing one of the cornerbacks. But in general, and what this defensive corner has been doing with them, how they've looked differently from, say, last year.
It's really been the pleasant surprise of the team. To piggyback off of what you had asked me earlier in the show, Adoree Jackson is now the number 1 guy. With James Bradbury, they had to let go of him, and he joined the division rival Eagles. So now the Giants and the Cowboys are still going to both have to deal with him in some capacity. But Adoree has held his own. He's looked really good. He's not a vocal guy. He's not a rah-rah guy. He just goes out there. He plays his assignments, and he's been solid. Aaron Robinson, who I mentioned was out, the crazy part about it is he was a big question mark coming in. Somebody who spent the bulk of last season on PUP. He had off-season core muscle surgery, so he missed the majority of the year. And then the results were hit or miss last season. So coming in now, it was like, okay, he now has to mature as a player. He's going to get a lot more snaps. And he actually played a good game against Tennessee. And then he had the appendectomy, so we didn't really see him build off of that. Outside of Adoree Jackson, Darnay Holmes has played a big role. Holmes has had some issues with penalties. He mentioned earlier 16 penalties for the team. 3 of them are on Darnay Holmes. He leads the team, and some of them have come in crunch time, so he's got to clean that up a little bit. He's their nickel back. But to me, the 2 stars of the secondary have been their safeties. Yep. Julian Love and Xavier McKinney. Why? Because these guys are so versatile. Love at Notre Dame played corner, and he's played a little bit corner with the Giants. And McKinney was a do-it-all type of player for Alabama. The bottom line is Wink Martindale is tapping into their varied skill set. For example, they played the Panthers last week. Christian McCaffrey is a very different running back from Derrick Henry. And this goes back to what we were talking about, how Dan Quinn is moving Micah Parsons around. Now Wink Martindale seems to be doing the same thing with McKinney. Some games it's going to be deep as a center fielder. Other games it's going to be close to the box. He had him mirror Christian McCaffrey. And it paid off. McCaffrey didn't do a lot of damage as a receiver. He had a 49-yard run. McCaffrey had a good game, don't get me wrong, but he didn't have what I like to call the back-breaking run. Now, here's what I'm fascinated with as we bring it into the Dallas conversation. The Cowboys have Zeke and Tony Pollard. I think Dallas, I would say that mimics Tennessee. Derrick Henry and Dontrell Hilliard. And Hilliard gave them headaches. He had 2 receiving touchdowns. So I think what happened was Wink Martindale saw that and said, I can't put linebackers on these running backs. They can't defend them in coverage. I'm going to have McKinney do that. So I guess my question is, do you have McKinney shadow Tony Pollard? And we're waiting for the Tony Pollard breakout game, right? Yeah, I could see the eyes rolling already.
We are too.
Okay. So maybe this is the game where Kellen Moore says, okay, hey, the Giants have had some trouble with those type of running backs. Maybe we test the waters and see how Wink is going to match up with them, because he made the change. Now I think if you're the Cowboys, you want to try to test and see, is it McKinney? Is it Tate Crowder? Who's he going to go with to try to match up with those running backs? It's still a little bit of a mystery because we've seen 2 different approaches in the first 2 games.
Well, what's funny about that is we look at Kellen Moore and we wonder who's he going to go with their running back.
Same thing. Same thing.
It's kind of where
Sure.
we are,
Same
and we
thing.
saw, unlike week 1, where they just kind of all call it, it's your turn to go in because Zeke needs a blow. In week 2, they actually, at least early on in the game, did scheme some things for Pollard. And, of course,
paid
those
off.
of us in Cowboys Nation, we hang our hat on hopefully Kellen Moore's in the bag, if you will, moving forward. And he decides to do that more often. But that's just kind of the antithesis. So, again, as y'all trying to figure out how it's going to match up, we're like, hey, can we get him on the field? Maybe. Possibly.
Well, week 1, I mean, we spent the entire offseason saying one of the missions of the Cowboys offense this year is to get Tony Pollard more touches. We saw him play almost an equal snap share to Zeke week 1, but he played in pass pro more than Zeke, and we're like, Zeke's a
Which
good
made no
pass pro. Like,
sense.
why?
Yeah,
That's
made
not
no
what we
sense.
made. No, Kellen, you misunderstood us. That's not what we spent the whole season asking for.
Yeah.
We want him to have the ball in his hands, not block. Like, that's not his thing. So, and
Wait,
then
but
he
I
had the
heard
big-
I heard his fantasy owners get points for every time he stays in for pass protection. Isn't that correct?
Oh, Lord.
I wish.
I
wish.
wish.
You wish with that. But
So I
But
have
yeah.
to ask you this question too, because this is a name that's very familiar with Cowboys fan base. He was signed last year when we played the Giants, and he's back for round 2 with the Giants. So
Yeah.
the Giants picked up Jalen Smith. Obviously started his career with the Cowboys, drafted out of Notre Dame, had the devastating injury, had some success and some good years with us, and then later in his career with us wasn't as pretty, especially moving laterally. He had a lot of issues in coverage, but was still pretty consistent in making plays when he was able to go downhill. So I know he's on the practice squad right now. Obviously, NFL rules allow you to call up 2 players a week. I don't know if he's going to fit in that category with the Giants this week, or this is more of a long-term play. But what are your thoughts on Jalen Smith being back with the Giants?
Well, it's a good move for them to add some depth at a position. You mentioned that they have some question marks still. Blake Martinez, who was the centerpiece of their linebacking core, they parted ways with him right before the season started.
Yeah,
And
that's
they've
a
gone
bummer.
with a young nucleus, whether it be Tate Crowder, Carter Coughlin they have on the roster. He's mainly been a special teamer. But, once again, that's why I go back to Wink Martindale has leaned more on the secondary. It's been more of a nickel and a dime defense than having the additional linebacker on the field. So Jalen Smith, I think, is somebody that as the season progresses, maybe that gives Wink a reason to keep an additional linebacker out there. But keep in mind, remember, when the Giants brought him in last season, it was a completely different defense.
Yeah.
It was Patrick Graham. He has yet to be exposed to what Wink Martindale wants to do. That's why I would be very surprised if they use him as one of the 2 call-ups. Because once again, he hasn't had a history in this scheme. For example, Tony Jefferson, not to get off topic, but he's a safety the Giants brought in late. He was in Wink Martindale's defense in Baltimore. They used one of their 2 call-ups on Tony Jefferson. Why? Because Jefferson knows the scheme. You don't have to worry about it. Jalen's not in that position. Plus, if Aaron Robinson is out again, which I'm expecting with the appendectomy, they may have to bring up Fabian Morrow, one of their additional corners. Or if Leonard Williams is absent, they may need to bring up another defensive lineman. I don't think the numbers game gives them the luxury to call up Jalen Smith on Monday night. I just think it's coincidental that, to your point, they added him again leading up to Cowboys week. But once again, Jalen's now a little bit removed from the Cowboys, and they've brought in some new personnel. So from a intel situation, I don't know how helpful Jalen is from that standpoint.
I have another question for you too, and then I'll let the rest of the panel ask. I thought it was interesting this week. The Giants worked out 3 long snappers. Is there anything behind that? Like, is the long snapper you guys have struggling, or why that position so heavily for tryouts this week?
Interesting point. Casey Kreider, their long snapper, and this is the only rationale that I can turn to as to why they had some of those others work out. He had a bad snap against Tennessee, which basically forced them to eat away an extra point. Now, they ultimately later on got the 2-point conversion, which gave them the lead. But there was a situation earlier in the game. They scored a touchdown and they settled for 6 points because it was just a bad snap. And when I say a bad snap, it like rolled on the ground. Now, here's the thing. Casey Kreider, who came over from Denver, was a Pro Bowler with the Broncos, and he's been the art of consistency. Part of me thinks that it was just sort of hey, let's see what's out there. God forbid he gets hurt, who we'd have to call in. I don't know if his job security is tense at this point where they're thinking about making a change. But if you asked me from an X's and O's standpoint, performance, that's the only thing that I could think of. Because last week, Graham Gano, he kicked 4 field goals, including the go-ahead one from 56 yards out, and it was mainly clean football. The only thing that, once again, was a red flag was the bad snap in the Tennessee game. That was it.
Okay.
In other words, they were doing due diligence, and we know
Due
all about
Sure.
due diligence here.
See, like the
And
linebackers
Cowboy
make
land.
sense because they also worked out, I think, 6 linebackers this week. Jalen Smith was added. So, like, usually when you see a position hit that heavily on tryouts or workouts, there's a reason behind it. So I just wanted to ask that because long snapper is not a position you usually see that heavily. So just wanted to ask. And Cincinnati just had the same issue the week before, but their long snapper was hurt. So they actually did sign a new long snapper. So really had him in practice squad. They called him up. But they did work out some players last week too.
Now, I didn't think we were going to discuss the X factor of this Giants-Cowboys game being the long snapper, but hey,
we covered all the bases
to new
Hey,
horizons.
if he fumbles that snap on Monday, I mean,
There you go. Well, if he fumbles the snap, I'm going to
on
come
Monday,
back.
we getting it. We recovering if he fumbles it on
Well,
Monday.
you absolutely cover it. But what I'm saying is if that happens by chance, just make sure that everybody comes back to this program and realizes that at 10:39 p.m. Eastern, 9:39 Central Time, we made sure that we threw that out and brought it to the forefront.
One of our important things we say, Nick says it all the time, special teams matters. So
Special
things
teams
like
matter.
that can factor into the game.
Does.
So.
And we got to cover all the context. We got to cover all the bases here, what might happen and might not happen. We can't just go to the big names. We got to get everywhere. We'll spin the block here, and we'll go with the Cowboys on this side. I'm going to go left to right, whatever it is. I'm just going to go around. Professor O, what's the X factor for the Cowboys to win this game?
It's our pass rush. I mean, stopping the run obviously is going to be important too, but when they do drop back to pass the ball, we need to get sacks. Sacks are impactful. We're not getting the takeaways at the same clip at all like last year. So we need to be able to force those long to down and distance situations. So getting a sack is basically the exact same equivalent of getting a fumble or, a tackle for loss in general, because the sack is a tackle for loss. So we need to be able to make Daniel Jones' internal clock speed up. We need to make him hold the football. That's where some of those takeaways can come from. And if you win the turnover battle, you heard me say it 1 billion times last year, you have a 78% chance to win the game. Mm-hmm. So that's our best bet to win this football game, because I don't think either offense is going to be high flying this week. The defenses are both playing well. They're both aggressive. We went over the blitz numbers earlier. So I just think we need to get Micah, Dorrance, Tank, whoever, to get home to Daniel Jones a few times and push them back and take that ball out of Saquon Barkley's hands. And the best way to do that is to stop the run, earn early downs, and then get big losses, 5, 6, 7 yard loss on a sack. And then next thing you know, it's 3rd and long and they can't even consider running the ball.
Okay. Mariella, what's the X factor for the Cowboys?
I mean, that's, I think, the most obvious answer.
You think it's the pass rush?
I think that's the most obvious answer.
That's fine.
I can add something else.
Whatever you want to do. It's your. We're trying to let Mary cook. It's whatever you want to eat. If you want to expound on that, if you want to pick something else, if that's your X factor, Mary, that's your X factor.
I mean, that's my X factor, but I will also say I heard something interesting on the radio today. I think it was ESPN that did a ranking of 32 starting QBs as it stands in week 2. So apparently last week, Cooper Rush was number 32. His performance got him up to 31. And Daniel Jones is number 30. So it's a battle of 30 and 31 quarterback. So I think it's, a huge part is, which QB doesn't turn the ball over and uses their weapons well.
Which quarterback can play at number 29 is what you're telling me, Mary.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Okay. All right. Spoonie, I don't know what's your microphone. You've been fighting your microphone all night. What's the X factor for you for the Cowboys to get this dub on Monday night? Just you being in the building, right? Okay.
Yes, sir. Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore. He has to repeat what he did last week. Be conservative. Attack the Giants' weakness. Whatever they're giving to him. Exploit it, run that ball, feed Pollard more. Pollard is made for big plays. That will help you move the chains. You don't want to having to go, as Lance said, go into the type of game where now we got to put the ball in Cooper Rush's hands to win the game. The defense is going to do its part. You just need to have a conservative game from the top to the end, move the chains, and we score some points. Defense is going to take care of the rest.
And for our guy Lance, I saved you last because you wear both hats, right? You're XM, obviously. You're also Giants Radio, so you get the opportunity if you want to do one for each team or just pick one team. The floor is yours on that part for which X factor for each team needs to happen to win the game.
I'm honored to wear multiple hats. Let me get that out of the way first. I'm going to go with one for each team. I think it's only appropriate since we're talking about this unique matchup. I think the professor hit it right on the nose. I'm with him. Cowboys, the pass rush. Get home against Daniel Jones. He has had issues with turnovers, especially when he's gotten hit. Now, you could argue most quarterbacks are put in a precarious spot, right, when you hit him from the blind side. But he lost the fumble when he was sacked. It was a strip sack against Tennessee. Let's see Dallas get hits on the quarterback. And even if you don't get the sack, the quarterback hits pile up. They wear a quarterback down. They get him thinking. It's got to be with Micah and company, considering the Giants' interior offensive line has been exposed to be a question mark. So that, to me, is the X factor for the Dallas defense. Because here's the thing. If the Dallas defense can do what they've done in the first two games, the Giants' offense scored 21 points in the first game, 19 in the second. And here's the other thing. Carolina got a gift. I should say gave the Giants a gift in the first quarter of the game. They fumbled the ball twice, one on special teams on the opening kickoff and then another by Robbie Anderson. So the Giants took over at the Carolina 40 and the Carolina 22. The Panthers spotted the Giants 6 points is my point.
Right.
In a 19-point game, you give 2 field goals. That's really 13 points technically that the Giants earned the hard way by actually moving the ball up and down the field. If Dallas can easily hold the team to 13 to 15 points, then you're asking Cooper Rush and company to get maybe 17 to 20 points. And I think that's extremely doable. For the Giants, what they need to do, they need to run the ball. I don't think this is a game that you want to put on the shoulders of Daniel Jones because of the reason I just talked about, the pressure that the Cowboys could bring. So if you're the Giants, you need to pound the ball with Saquon. You need to stay in manageable third downs, milk the clock, wear down that Dallas defense, and keep them on the field so that they're huffing and puffing by the time the fourth quarter comes along. So Giants run game, Dallas pass rush. Those are the two X factors.
Yeah, for me, I definitely agree with the Giants. I think it's definitely all about Saquon Barkley and keeping the chains at the right marks and maybe hitting that big play. Or as you said earlier about Christian McCaffrey, can he provide the back-breaking run even? So I definitely agree with the Giants about it being about Saquon Barkley. I actually agree with Spoon on Kellen Moore because I think the defense is going to do what they're going to do. So I think the X factor for me, when I think of it in that realm, is Kellen Moore. Because if you go back to week one against the Bucs, right, Zeke's cooking. Zeke's eating. He's out. He's 10 carries, 52 yards. He's 5.2. And then they just kind of got away from it. And then we fast forward to the following week against the Bengals. Not only did they run the ball pretty effectively early, but they got Pollard involved. And they kind of stuck with it and kind of shortened the game specifically in the second half to just be able to get that field goal to win. So I'm with Spoon on this one for this week anyways, with Kellen Moore being consistent with the run game, picking up where he left off last week against the Bengals. Whew. Y'all want to go with winners? You want to go with winners? Lance, who you think wins the game?
Boy, this is such a tough one to figure out, mainly because the Giants have been involved in close games, and it's been by the chinny chin that they've won both. I expect this game to be highly contested, and I'll go back to what the professor said earlier. I think this could be an ugly, grinded-out affair, just like the Giants-Panthers game that I witnessed this past week, meaning it was 19-16, it was field goals, it was field position. I like the Cowboys' pass rush a lot better than the Giants' offensive line, and I think Dallas's defense can really dictate and set the tone and take it easy on Cooper Rush, meaning I think Dallas's defense is going to put Cooper Rush in a position where he doesn't have to be the hero. He doesn't have to throw for 3 touchdowns. They'll keep the game within striking distance, and that's why I give the Cowboys a slight edge in this game. I could see them winning 21-18 or something like that. You know, that's how I could see this game turning out.
The Giants fans in the chat are saying, say it, Lance, come on. Lance, they're just waiting on you to say the Giants.
I don't play favorites here. Listen, I do not play favorites. I make that clear to any program I'm on.
Right.
I just call it how I see it. That's it.
I understand, because part of what I do for Cowboys Wire is I have to write data analytics articles, and we use some of the biggest stats in terms of win probability to say who has the advantage. And there were some games last year that weren't favorable to the Cowboys, and we happened to lose most of those games, and the fans like ate me alive. I'm like, it's just the numbers. Like, I don't get to pick what they say. It's just what it is. Like, They have more explosive plays than we do. That's a good indication they're going to win. They've turned the ball over less than we are. That's a good indication they're going to win. So when you kind of put the stuff together, people get upset. But I understand you have to be fair when you're doing things. You can't just pick and choose. So I got you.
All right. Well, who wins the game?
So I definitely think it's going to be an ugly game. I will say this too, especially because it's a primetime football game. Both teams have been susceptible to penalties. The Cowboys were one of the most penalized teams in the league last year, but also our opponents were also the most penalized team as well. We had the most penalties called against us, and we had the second most penalties called against our opponents. I fully expect this to be a flag fest, because that's what we see a lot as Cowboys fans in big games for both sides. Like, this is going to be one of those where Cowboys or Giants get 10 to 11 penalties each. One of those like games where you're just pulling your hair out, like, refs, just let them play. But I think it's going to be 20 to 17, somewhere in that range, maybe 17-13. So I'm going to go 17-13. Cowboys win by a very small margin.
Okay. Mary, who's winning the game?
I've gone back and forth about this.
Uh-huh.
I don't trust how the Cowboys offense finished last game. I thought they got too comfortable. They got too careless. But also, I just have so much faith in our defense. And I feel like it's actually not being talked about enough what they did the first 2 weeks. We've given up 2 touchdowns, playing 2 top quarterbacks, and 2 top offense. So I'm really struggling. With this. But since I picked us to lose last week, I'm going to pick us to lose this week.
Okay. Ride the way. Right. Hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Ride the way, Mary. Spoonie, who's winning this game? Don't go to a sermon. Just who's winning the game, sir.
The Cowboys. I picked 28-14. I think 2 scores will be by the defense.
28.
Well, he's quick to the moment. I'm of the mindset. Yeah, I don't know if it'll be a flag fest, but it's going to be. It just kind of feels like it's going to be one of those. When you get them NFC East games on Monday Night Football, they got a different little vibe to them, a little different energy. And then you're looking at the Giants coming in 2-0 and where they're at. And look, one thing that I say big about Brian D is, unlike the previous coaching staffs, early on it would seem he's built a little different. He's brought a different energy into that organization, a little bit of fresh air, if you will. Winning helps that, but how he interacts with the players and changing the culture there seems that way. So that's why I definitely don't think this is just a Cowboys show up and win and all that kind of stuff. This is going to be a dogfight. I definitely believe that. I think it's very low scoring. I think the Cowboys will win this game 17-10. And might be something a little late from the Cowboys to get in the end zone. I think it's going to come down to the final few minutes of the game to see what happens.
I'm telling you guys, I would almost guarantee you it'll be a flag fest. I would bet money it will be.
Teams are
penalized a lot.
It's fair. That's fair. I'm just trying to put it in the atmosphere. We didn't have a ton of flags like we did week one, so I'm hoping maybe we don't have this many this week. But sometimes AFC battles, it gets a little chippy. Things kind of happen. And of course, the last time, right, the Tony game, hey, there was some fist thrown and different things were happening. So there is opportunity for it to get chippy, and then flags can start happening when refs want to get more involved and keep their hands on the game and keep people calm too. So it could happen, but. I'm for my health, I'm just going to say hopefully we don't have a lot of flags.
Yeah, I will be. Oh, God, that's the worst thing. Just call it, let them play. Just call it even and let them play.
Mm-hmm. All right, big facts. With that being said, round of applause, everybody, for our guy who has come through, Lance Medow. Man, it was awesome to meet you in at least this month, not person, but via the camera after listening to your work and appreciate your work from afar and coming through and rock with us, man. anytime you want to come this way, man, just hit us up, man. It's an open door, sir. Whenever you want to make it this way, anything you want to plug to tell the people, or anything where they tell them to find you, by all means, go right ahead, sir.
Well, I don't know if there's much substance in promoting Giants programming on a Dallas Cowboys centered show.
No Giants fans in here. It's okay. You never know who it is.
Shy away from that. Well, clearly you can hear me on the Giants radio network. I do the pre, half, and post-game show, and that can be heard on Giants.com, Sirius XM, the Giants team channel, which is new this year. And then we have a daily podcast, Big Blue Kickoff Live on Giants.com, as well as other programming. But as far as my serious work, I have a show on Mad Dog Sports Radio, Channel 82, Saturdays, Sundays, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern. I do all types of shows on NFL Radio, Channel 88, including the post-game show after every Monday night game, and a bunch of other work, which clearly people can see on my Twitter handle, which is at Lance Medow, and the last name, as you guys correctly spelled, thank you on the graphic, is Medow. There is no A in my last name. So other than that, I think we covered all the territory. The only thing I did want to add, just from an X's and O's standpoint, was we didn't really talk much about special teams, and we haven't seen Kevontae Turpin get maybe a big opportunity. The Giants' special teams coverage units have been a little shaky. Kyle Phillips, Tennessee, had a big return. I wouldn't be surprised. You know, we're talking about an ugly, low-scoring game. I think we all agree on that. Special teams could very well decide this game. Fumble for one of the teams, a big return, which shortens the field for Cooper Rush or Daniel Jones. Don't be surprised if that actually turns out to be the biggest X factor of all.
Nice. That would be great.
But y'all know me. Special teams
Turbo
matter.
Turpin.
Say, hey, say less in my book. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you follow everybody's Twitter's handles is up here. Go right ahead. Make sure you hit the follow if you're not following us already. We appreciate y'all. It's free 99. Shout out to all the Giants fans that came into the building. Clap it up loud enough for them for coming through and rocking with us tonight as well. Lance, you definitely brought Big Blue over here onto the channel. So
they're much nicer than the Philly fans. So
I'll be honest with you, I mean, the fans over there are a little bit nicer than Cincinnati, man. I'm saying we was getting ramshacked over in the Twitter spaces. Dear God, I'm still waiting. I won the bet on the Bengals. I'm waiting for my wings, and I can't find my guy. He's got Twitter uninstalled. He pulled the burrow in the digs, and he uninstalled Twitter apparently because I can't find him to get my wings. But hey, you know, one day they'll come back around. He'll come back on Twitter. I'm like, oh, there you are, and I'll find him. But once again, follow everybody here, and of course, each and every Friday you can catch us right back here for the Freestyle Friday show at 9:30 p.m. Central. Anybody else? Go right ahead. Anybody else? Anybody's got anything funny want to go? I mean, my guy's plugged. I've said, Mary, I know you're doing good. The new place. She's like, oh, she's glowing. She won. Spoonie, for everybody, Johnson, whatever. Our guy Spoonie's going to be in the building for the game, man. Pull up on him. He'll definitely be there having a good time.
Or invite him to your tailgate, you know.
Oh, there you go. Invite him to the tailgate even. Yeah, there it is. Man, look, I've seen video. Spoonie has sent me video of him when he's at games and what he does. Look, he's been to Dallas. I've been to Dallas games with him. And it's cool. And we're turned up and we're cheering. It's fine. Yeah. Spoonie's different at MetLife, though. See, I'm one year I'm about to go up there and fly up there and go to a game at MetLife with you, Spoon, because you're a different kind of animal when you go to the Cowboys game up there than you are down here.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of Giant fans as friends, and sometimes they get me to that point. But it's like when you walk into that parking lot and it's Cowboys and Giants, it's a different feeling. It just I'm not playing or nothing like that, but being part of that is the atmosphere is just crazy. You have to get excited for it, and I'll be very honest. It's the best game that go every year, Cowboys and Giants. The best game, and I always invite everybody try that experience. Is awesome.
I'm doing it next year, Spoon. Put it on the docket. I'm coming up. Professor, what you got for the people before we get out of here?
Yeah, I'm about halfway through my article for this week, but it should be out hopefully tomorrow afternoon or Friday morning, but you can find it on Cowboys Wire, usatoday.com. It is the advanced stat notebook, and we're talking about Cowboys Giants, everything from adjusted net yards per attempt to toxicity to EPA to DVOA, anywhere in that range, it's going to be there. So if you are a stat junkie or just kind of want to delve into it, I break down what that means, how it applies to the game, how it factors in win probability and all that stuff. It's kind of nerd stuff, but it's fun. And it kind of gives you a different perspective as you watch the game if you read the article. So I have one every week. And this week it should be out again Thursday or Friday morning.
That part is why they call him the professor, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate y'all as always. We'll be back here Friday for sure, like I did say. And we'll catch y'all on the Twitterverse and the Facebook streets or wherever on social media. We'll find you over on that side. Y'all be blessed. Have a great rest of your week.